What was the best worth it detention in school? A teacher I know had a goldfish on his desk. When the class came in for their first day, he gave them a few rules. However, he said that his most important rule was that no one touch his goldfish no matter what. Midway through the year, he begins to teach his students about how laws whilst upheld by the government are not always just. During this lesson, he takes the goldfish out of its bowl and throws it on the ground to let it die. My friend, who acted out of instinct, picks up this goldfish and puts it back in the bowl. He was given a detention for his offense, and the detention description said for doing the right thing. Dang, I think I like this teacher. In elementary, I got detention because I got the last word in a snowball fight by bringing one into the classroom in my coat pocket and throwing it at my friend. Spent lunch recess writing "I will not throw snow in school" 1,000 times for a few days, but totally worth it. Back in 5th grade, we had to do our homework, and if we didn't, we had to write 25 lines of "I will do my homework on time and correctly" or some crap like that, and I thought only 25 lines frick yeah, and didn't ever do homework in that grade. In high school, my dad dropped me off out front after all the buses had left. Vice principal was being an butthole for no reason and giving my dad crap for parking in a bus lane, when in fact he had not violated any rules. It was clear the VP was trying to pick a fight. After a brief heated exchange, my dad drove off, and I heard the VP mutter "butthole" under his breath. I stood in front of the building, waited for the VP to turn around and see me, held up a brazen middle finger, and walked inside. Ignoring his demands that I stop, I proceeded to dodge detention until I was pulled from class. TLDR, flipped off vice principal in front of the school. Felt great. If you were my child, I'd be proud of you. You stuck up for your dad, and that's awesome. For an exam in my class, I wrote my name as Mike Cockburns. The next day I was called into the office with the vice principal, and she showed me the test, pointed to the name I wrote in, and asked me what she should do about it. I said, "Put some ice on it, worth it." I went to a K-8 Catholic school. Our school lunches were pitifully small. Same portion for 1st graders as for 8th graders. The lunch ladies understood that the portions were small and would often let students get second servings, which they were otherwise going to throw out. I went to get some extra salad. Rather than giving me an additional serving, they just gave me the remaining heaping mound of cheap iceberg lettuce drenched in Italian dressing. It was seriously probably several pounds of salad. I had no intention of eating the entirety of it, but a teacher caught me eating the leftovers and said I had ought to finish it, otherwise it would be so wasteful. At that point it became a competition to prove her wrong. I had to stay probably an extra 10 minutes to finish munching down the pile of salad. When I finished, the teacher called me a pig and gave me a detention for some arbitrary reason. I relished in the look of her disgust and gleefully took the detention. Sounds like that scene in Matilda kinda. Moved to a new high school which had classrooms that were not laid out in a standard way. They had a no tolerance tardy policy. Show up to class 30 seconds late, detention. You're a new kid and can't figure out where the classrooms are, detention. First day I racked up 7 detentions. Crap keeps going on. I figure out detention in this school is just a 45-minute study hall where I can get my homework done in a quarter of the time it takes me to do at home. And because I played sports, Saturday detention was waived for me. Now worst case scenario is that I spend a minimal amount of extra time at school and my homework is done in record time. Guess how my tardiness improved under these circumstances? Principal calls me in at the end of the semester or year. I forget. He asks me, "Are you trying to wallpaper your house with detention slips?" I explained the situation, which went over well because I had straight A's and no other behavioral stuff. Principal points out that it is literally impossible for me to complete the detentions I have before I graduate. End result, I get excused from ever getting a detention for being tardy for the rest of high school. This seems like it was just a massive elaborate plan from the start. In 8th grade I hit my friend in the balls in front of a teacher. On the detention slip I was written up for attacking another student's scrotum. My mom even got a laugh out of that one. She definitely included the scrotum part just for the humor of it, I feel. I went to a strict technical school. Like you always had to sit at the same spot in the cafeteria. No talking. Nothing other than bread and beverages on the table. No schoolwork, laptops, phones. These were just some of the rules during midday. However, once you were in 5th or 6th year, 17-18 years old, you were allowed to leave and were taken off these lists. I went to the secretary of the school one day to discuss some initiatives we were starting in the school in terms of soccer tournaments during the week, etc. He got a call and left the room for 2 minutes. The lunch forms were open on his computers. I took my and some of my friends' names off. Next week we slipped out of the campus and we were free. It felt like we'd escaped prison. It took them 2.5 months to notice. Longer if it weren't for a new person to be added to our class. I got 1 day of detention in return for 50 days on the loose. Boy, was it worth it. Got a day of in-school suspension once for skipping a class I didn't feel like going to, so I got to miss it the following day as well. 11-year-old me thought it would be hilarious to take chicken drumsticks along to music class instead of my actual drumsticks. Bits of chicken flying around a drum kit, a class hysterically laughing, a red-faced angry music teacher, and I later found myself in detention. From memory, no significant damage was caused to the drum kit. It was a ratty looking thing that had needed heads replacing for many years before 11-year-old me came along anyway. 5 years on from the chicken drumstick incident, I began earning a living from playing drums, but my days of using chicken ended age 11. 16 years later, people from that class still bring up the chicken drumstick incident in conversation with me. 11-year-old you was right. In my school there was a rule that if the teacher didn't show up within 10 minutes we were allowed to leave. So once while waiting for our German teacher the whole class decided to leave after 8-9 minutes. We start walking and then suddenly we spot her behind us and the whole class just starts running away from her and down the stairs. She runs after us while yelling German obscenities at us. We escaped but everyone got a detention. Some kid was stealing money out of the locker rooms every day after school while sports teams were practicing. I skipped cross-country practice one day and hid in the shower area in an attempt to catch them. After waiting for over an hour, I finally heard someone enter. I didn't know what I would be up against, so I had taken my belt off as some sort of makeshift weapon. Just made me feel safer. I hear the sound of Velcro separating, and I knew I had finally caught him. I ran out to the locker area, and he flung the wallet in his hands away and immediately pretended to be opening a lock on the locker. The culprit was this tiny 8th grader. Junior high was connected to the high school. As he sat there fumbling with a lock, I just stood and waited. Finally, when it was clear to him that he wasn't fooling me, and that he didn't know the combination of the locker he was trying to open, he looked up at me. I started yelling at him, telling him how many people wanted to kick his butt. The wallet he was opening was one of my friends, who was in open gym close by. I told him to wait there unless he wanted trouble, and got my friend. Ultimately, we started trying to extort the money he had stolen over the last few weeks with threats, because we were concerned that if we turned him in we wouldn't see a dime. Finally the kid turned himself in, because he didn't have any of the money left, a way to make the money, and was legitimately concerned we were going to hurt him. The discipline lady said something I'll never forget. "You just can't do that. I'm glad you did, but you can't take the law into your own hands. I'm sorry, but I've got to give you detention for this." She asked why I didn't turn him in, so I answered her honestly. She asked us to get a list together, and made the parents pay up. All in all, totally worth it. TLDR, I caught a kid stealing and extorted money from him rather than turning him in. I go to an all-boy private school. We played Boys Town. Has girls also, a school that is for kids who are troublemakers, got kicked out of school, don't have a stable home life act. During a football game they shouted "We have girls," we replied with "We have parents." The entire senior class received detention. Was shocking my friends with capacitor from a disposable camera when the teacher demanded I gave it to her. I told her she didn't want it but she insisted I put it in her hand. Shocked the crap out of her. Served the B right. She had previously failed me on a midterm for asking someone to stop throwing their candy wrappers at me and they still passed. I was in 8th grade and our gym teacher picked one student per class to make his personal B. I wasn't having any of it, so everything he tried I was able to one-up him. His final straw was when we were throwing frisbees and he threw one at me. At the last second he said "Soti, heads up," expecting me to get hit in the face. I don't know it happened, but without looking I grabbed it, spun around and whipped it back at him fast enough and hard enough to give him a bloody nose. He sent me to the principal's office where she, while laughing her butt off, had to give me a 3-day suspension due to attacking a teacher. I found out 2 years later that he was fired from his job after that year due to multiple students from several years coming forward and claiming physical and verbal abuse. So it was totally worth it to get that butthole out of teaching. Ah yes, a quick time event. Your player is skilled at button mashing. Math teacher. And using this we must be able to throw our calculators out the window and do without them. Finally throws calculator out window. I can imagine a kid just smiling for a few seconds until you hear the Wilhelm scream from a couple stories below. Large portion of the senior class had lightsaber duels in our graduation gowns on our last day. Those of us that got caught had a Saturday detention. Seems counterintuitive to give detention to people that just graduated. I wonder how many actually showed up. I got in trouble for breaking up a fight. Or at least I was breaking it up until I saw it was my twin brother getting choked out by the biggest kid in school. I slugged him in the face a dozen times and ended up kneeing his head into a locker a few more. Walked away unscathed. Got pulled out of study center not 10 minutes later. Sounds totally worth it. I'd do the same for my twin brother. Girl I had a major crush on passed me a note. Teacher saw the pass and said to bring it to her. I flat out told her no. I was sent to the office and I read it on the way just in case I had to give it up. The note basically said she was falling in love with me and wanted to know if I felt the same. Worth it. I never lost the note letter. Yes, we dated. And it was amazing. The sad part is that her father got a job in another state and she had to move. We tried to stay connected back then. It was the late 90s. But it ultimately didn't work. It was becoming painful for the both of us and we just lost contact. A few years ago I found out she was alive and doing well. I'm happily married to a wonderful woman now and there's nothing I would do to change that. My ex and I had our time together and it caused us both to grow emotionally. I don't think I'd be the person I am now if not for that experience. So I say once more, worth it. In middle school science class, we were dissecting frogs. After removing all of the internal organs, I decided it was time to make a frog finger puppet and sneak up behind unsuspecting students and do my best Kermit the Frog impression. When my class was dissecting a frog, I squeezed the frog's colon until a hard turd started making its way out of the frog's anus, held it up for the class to see, then shouted, "IT's pooping." I had a teacher who would not let anyone go to the bathroom the entire year. So the last month of school, my friends and I got so fed up with it I decided to take action. I brought an extra change of clothes hidden in my backpack and drank 3 bottles of water at lunch. During class that afternoon, I asked the teacher if I could use the restroom, and of course, she responded with the usual no. So I said okay and just pee all over myself and the desk. I had an extra change of clothes so it was only uncomfortable for a little bit. The look on her face was worth it. Now she lets any and everyone go to the bathroom as needed. You're welcome, America. TL. DRP all over myself during class at school to make a point to the teacher to let people go to the bathroom during class. You could have just poured a water bottle on your crotch or something. I once instigated a whole revolution in my Catholic school. We had an horrible math teacher that nobody liked. When he took vacations they brought a substitute teacher that was really great. So we did a petition with signatures from students of all grades for them to keep her as the official teacher. I was the head of the movement so I went to the principal with the documents to show our efforts. She laughed at me and told to get the heck out of there because students don't have the right to demand such things. I went back to class crying. 7th grade, and my classmates became really angry that the principal had treated me like that, so everybody got out of the class, started to call the other students in all classes to join then, and they did. At the end of it, everybody stood at the street in front of the school yelling that the principal was a bee. I was in serious trouble after that, but totally worth it. Catholic school. Our principal was sick so we made get well cards. I drew a smiley face with a tongue. The teacher said the tongue was offensive and I had to erase it. I said, okay, Satan, worth it. She was a freaking C. I'm commenting on all the Catholic school posts to commiserate lol. But during our detentions we had to write an apology letter to the headmaster. Friend of mine decided it was BS and that they never read the letters. So he started an explicit erotic letter professing his love for good ole Mr. K. Turns out that they did read them occasionally. He got suspended. I was given detention because my hair was too long on the first day of my junior year of high school. The admissions director was new, and it was his first day at an all-boys school, and I think he thought he needed to lay down the law. He pulled me aside about it, and I was mouthy about it, and he almost expelled me. During that detention, he and I talked like normal people, and got along great. We became friends through it. After that, I got away with pretty much everything because he was my friend. We are still friends today, 10 years later. I would say that detention was worth it. After being bullied a lot between the ages of 8-14, I finally snapped when as I was walking away from a bully he said keep rolling fat boy in front of a girl I liked. I turned around in a blinding anger and hit him so hard I broke a few bones on my hand and his nose. He fell back and landed in a puddle of mud and started crying. Fast forward to sitting outside the head teacher's office after I was reported for fighting. And out comes my favorite teacher who apparently saw the whole thing and fought my corner, meaning the only punishment I got was a week's of lunchtime detentions. I was never bullied again after that incident and I just wish I had done it sooner. About whether or not this was the right thing to do, I just wanted to say that as an adult this is clearly not the correct response to verbal abuse. But that being said, as a 14-year-old boy the only options I saw at the time was to wait it out until the end of school. 2-3 years I think. Or start defending myself. It's nice to read that you are not alone in your worst experiences and I have enjoyed your stories. Lastly, to those asking, nothing really happened with my crush. I was still the fat kid, but I like to think I gained some amount of respect after that day. Reading about Helen Keller in 7th grade English. Me. Hey, teacher, have you ever seen Helen Keller's house? Teacher, no. Why? Me. Neither has she. Teacher, I haven't heard that one before. You. Neither has she. There was a kid I knew who took a piece of post-it paper just big enough to cover the lasers on all the mice in 3 computer labs. I think he got a week of detention. My school's computer teacher did that for April Fool's Day. They named it the McLaughlin virus after him. Well, after setting a toilet on fire the strap just wasn't doing it anymore, so they gave me an in-house suspension. For the unaware, the strap was a leather strap that they whipped the palm of your hands with. Good times. So for a week I was left all alone in a small office. Just me, my homework, and a computer. I knew nothing back then. This was in 1989 to 1990. All I knew was some MS-DOS commands they taught me in my technology course, and how to navigate directories and stuff. Apparently that was the server for their fledgling computer network linking them and the school board. Something like that. There was important stuff in there. Anyway, I wiped everything. Transferred to a cooler school 2 weeks later. Dude. I was a freshman in high school, and still a religious virgin. I was asked why I was waiting to frick until I was married. I answered with several reasons, including that I didn't want to end up with STDs. A nearby girl, who didn't really care for me, assumed I was trying to say that I didn't want to end up like her and threatened to shoot me. I calmly told her to shut her mouth. Both of us were threatened to be suspended. She cried and asked for forgiveness from the principal. I sat in his office with a straight look on my face, insisting shut your mouth was a sufficient response to a death threat. Because she cried and I didn't, I was suspended. She was not. That's some grade A balls. Okay, so a little background. The teacher was a science teacher for junior high, so he taught 7/8 graders. His name was Mr. Butler, and I can honestly say he was the worst teacher I have ever had the displeasure of meeting. He made fun of everyone, including the one kid in my grade that was actually mentally retarded. But enough of that, onto the story. It started out like any other science class. Boring. We talked about space and some other stuff I don't remember, but that's not important. After space, Mr. Butler went on to talk about states of matter. He said there were 3. Me being the smart but I was raised my hand and said no, that's not true. There is 4. They had recently been debating on adding plasma as the 4th state of matter. In front of the whole class he says, "You know Sam, no one likes a know-it-all." Immediately after he said that I fired back, "Is that why nobody likes your class? I was king of 7th grade that day." I still tell people this story when they talk about ripping on their teachers. I got detention for 3 weeks, which was the remainder of the school year, for playing the final countdown during the offering at our school's mass. Catholic schools, what are you gonna do? Recovering Catholic school student here. Our funniest was a guy who went to get communion and fell on the floor convulsing, pretending to speak in tongues. Those of us in on the joke found it hilarious. Younger kids started crying. Teachers split between frick this kid and hold on, this could be real. Crap went too far. When I was a freshman we had to go to an assembly for the senior class president and other positions. One of the dudes running for president was rumored to have an enormous dong, like a real life knee slapper. Anyway, everyone else running gave 10-15 minute speeches about how they'd improve the school blah blah blah. These were a big deal at my school and the speeches were always very carefully planned and thought out. People didn't try to be funny, so this kid gets up to the podium, looks around, leans close to the microphone and just says, "The rumors are true." He walked away with the most absurd amount of confidence I've ever seen as a full gymnasium of kids 14-18 either laughed, gasped, or in the case of some girls, literally swooned. He won, but after that we didn't do speeches anymore. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.